Welcome back to this episode of Incredibly Human. Christina, we are here alone again.
We are. Yes. Getting used to that. Alone again. Isn't there a song?
Alone again, naturally.
Naturally. Yes. Yeah. Talks about like jumping off the top of a tower. It's fun. It's a good one.
Yeah, we're off
The
to a
uplifting.
rocking happy start for this episode.
We should have music that reflects what we're trying to do. A DJ in the background. Maybe Rachel can start being our DJ.
Was the intro for this episode will just be all by myself.
Yes. The remake. All by ourselves.
So this is a very aware conversation, which is fitting because what we wanted to talk about today is mindfulness and what that means and how to do it.
Yes.
So not to put you on the spot, it's a very large topic, but how would you help describe mindfulness to people? Because I think there's a lot of misunderstandings out there, and I have some thoughts on what it is and how it's helpful to apply. But what would you say?
So my take on mindfulness is the practice of being in the moment. So the practice to being fully present, mindful, but fully present in whatever it is happening and we're doing. And I think about being with my kids as mindful moments to kind of record or register in my brain. Because it's that moment of, yesterday Luca started playing basketball outside in our cul-de-sac. And did I have a million things to do? Yes, all the time. Was I about to go upstairs to do something else? Of course. And yet I chose to not do whatever it is that was on my list and go outside and play basketball with him. And in that moment, that is all I thought about doing. That is all I was doing. I wasn't feeling bad for where I was not doing. I wasn't judging myself for how bad I am at basketball. I wasn't wondering how long I need to be here. And is this good enough of a mother moment? Can I get off the hook soon? None of that. I was just there doing that my full mind was focused on playing with him for as long as I felt like doing it.
That's a great example. Yeah. Having the awareness and the presence. And I think those are the two kind of sides that I would say are important to mindfulness. There's the awareness of realizing, oh, this is, the fully present moment where you're like, no, I'm going to go do basketball, right? This is the time to do that. I realize this is something I want to be a part of, that there's a conscious choice in that. And I think that's one big part of mindfulness too, is being consciously aware of things that are happening in your mind, which is why you're mindful of your own mind and you're mindful of your thoughts. You understand kind of how you're feeling, how you're feeling about that, and being very engaged in the current moment. And that feels like a lot of mindfulness. And that's, I think it's one thing that gets very conflated with things like meditation. People, I guess, meditation, mindfulness, like different things. Meditation can be a good way to practice mindfulness, but those are not the same things. And you can practice mindfulness outside of meditation in any everyday moments, like basketball.
Yeah, I agree. Especially
imply that. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Oh yeah.
Oh, hey, when talking about meditation, I meditate. I've been meditating nonstop for 3 years, I think, or so, almost 3 years. And so I'm now a lot more aware of the difference between the two. And I am fully a proponent of exercising meditation helps become more mindful. And it's not because they're interchangeable or they're the same thing, because they're actually not. But it's because it's that practice of stopping and being in the moment and accepting where I am. That's the meditation. And so it's almost like, if you're a tennis player, it's almost like running every morning to then be able to play tennis better, because you can run to catch the ball in a stronger way.
Yeah. That practice does allow you to then get there in the moments outside of meditation. And so what are some other like mindful practices that you've used or things that you enjoy? Any other expressions of mindfulness?
We actually did quite a few mindful exercises when I was going through the IPEC coach training. There was an expectation and communicated expectation that we would start every in-person session, and we had 3 days every 3 months for 3 modules. So there were nine fully in-person sessions with a mindful exercise where the whole room would be guided into mindfulness. And a lot of what we've done is the pause, close your eyes, and start thinking about, what's your body feeling. That's one of, that's a good practice of figuring out like, okay, and then kind of scanning your body from the tip of your head to the tip of your toes, go through the scanning and figure out what's feeling tight, what's feeling loose, what's feeling comfortable, what's feeling uncomfortable. And it's that practice of kind of like meditation of be here. And this is the only thing to do, and be still. Don't think about anything else. Don't think about what's going to be for lunch. Don't think about anything, whatever, how long this is going to be. Is just be here. That's a very common one, the body scan, or it could be any other sort of guided, let's practice eliminating the noise.
Mm-hmm. And I do like that idea because these are all practices. These are ways to help you get into a more mindful spot. And for me, I think a lot of the ones I think meditation is great. Body scan is very helpful. I do a lot of journaling personally. I find that helpful to be able to just write what I am thinking, feeling, digested opinions, process things that haven't been processed yet. It's a great chance for me personally. I'm not great at immediately accessing a lot of emotions. I'm good at tucking them away. And so journaling becomes a way to find those and then be more in touch next time when there's patterns that feel the same. Same with body scan. It's a great way to feel out where what you might be experiencing in the present moment so you can more accurately relate to it, respond to it, and decide how you'd like to go forward.
I think something else that can come out of exercising mindfulness is, presence when you're in conversations with somebody else. And so truly being, which also can give you deep listening and active listening, is being there and making a conscious decision to be there. So let go of the script, let go of your answers, let's go of responding before the other person is done, let go of figuring out what you need to buy at the grocery store when you're on your way home, or what you're missing. A lot of what prevents mindfulness is wondering, what am I not doing? I wish, I should be doing this and I should be doing that. There's a lot of shoulding that comes with not being mindful. You shouldn't be doing anything else. Just be here, listen with total open mind. It's not a time thing. It's not okay, I'll do it for 5 minutes. I'll be mindful for 5 minutes. You're already not mindful because you've decided to be mindful for 5 minutes.
I like your examples of the grocery store and something especially too, because like those will still be there, and that's something that's easy example of when we are not really in the moment. Like you're like, oh man, the fridge is running low on food, right? I'm gonna have to go to the grocery store, and then you're like, well, I have meetings for a little bit, but in those meetings you're thinking like, when am I gonna have to get to the grocery store? What do we have the things for like a soup tonight? And that's when you come back in with the classic. I'm sorry, you were breaking up there. What was that? Because you're off on like, do we have 8 celery sticks? Or are they bad? And they're not.
Can I substitute them with something else?
Yeah, do we have something that I could just use instead? I don't really want to go to the grocery store. How much time will that take? Do I have time to go pick up the kids and go to the grocery store? Like now you tune back in and you're like, sorry, what was the most important takeaway you just had for this meeting? Go back? All right. Okay, cool. Great. Thanks.
Exactly. Yeah. Not being mindful. Multitasking is the opposite of mindfulness.
And you can see why that would be especially important. I like your examples of the IPEC one, right? So you've got coaching training. It would be pretty important to be actively listening and be able to listen to the people that you are coaching. It would be a lot harder to coach them without hearing what they are saying and being able to respond to that and being present in that moment. But it's a great example of why it would be good for coaches, but that's something that's just as important if you're being coached, if you're helping anyone else, if you're relating to anyone else, because you do need those moments of being able to connect to somebody if you want to be able to have effective communication.
It is. It's a huge communication tool for sure. Because again, you let go of the script, you let go of your expectations of their response, and you're letting go of having an answer to something that they haven't even said yet and filling the blank. And so if you go into whether it's clients, your team, anything from a business situation, and you go in with fully what I call the coach hat, with fully open mind of knowing this is how long we have, this is why we're here. I have a general idea why we're here, but that's it. I am going to let go of everything else, judgments, preconceptions, things I may want to say until the right moment arises, and truly listen, especially in one-on-ones. That's huge. The one-on-one is not about you, leader. The one-on-one is for your employee. So let go. You don't know what they're going to say. You don't have to have an answer to everything they're going to say. You don't have to have a solution for everything they're going to say. The best way to run one-on-ones is to be fully there, mindfully listening, and be curious, understand what's going on. That's your only goal.
That's a really good insight to curiosity. That's a huge portion of this. It's like wondering, like, what am I really thinking here? How am I feeling about that? What is that person thinking about this? Not in a constant, guessing, judging way, but just curiosity, open to what that might mean, so that you don't have that script. I mean, how many times have you entered a conversation, think that it might become an argument, so you come fists balled behind your back, basically, like ready just in case, like
fully armored. Yes.
Yeah.
Got the shield down. Okay.
Take a totally different response. And they're like, oh, do you feel that? Well, great. We should do it that way. And you're like, okay, well, I need to go take a quick walk and unclench my fists and we'll be good. And I'm glad we agree on this. That's where mindfulness helps not get attached to what might happen, but be attached to what is happening, so that when those things change, and vice versa, you might be expecting something to go over smoothly and somebody pushes back. If you're in a more mindful space, you can respond in a more present manner rather than jumping to a defensiveness you might not mean, or jumping past being too argumentative, or backing down because you're like, I didn't expect this to be a fight. I'll just wait. But then later you're like, I should have done something about that. This is where mindfulness helped us get back into the moments. And if you're thinking that sounds exhausting and like a lot of work, you're right. It is. It's not, it is. These aren't just easy things to do, which is why practice is so much a part of so many mindful articles, blogs, and any activities. It's a practice.
And it is exhausting. I find it's interesting though, because I think it's exhausting when you're not practicing it and you're not used to it. Once you do get used to it, it becomes extremely energizing because you have breaks. You have constant breaks from predicting, worrying, projecting, judging, like all these things that takes up so much energy. It's gone. Like I remember feeling this way when we went up to our clients the other day, because we were about to go up and do some sessions of something that was fairly deep, and it needed a certain amount of attention and concentration and focus. But it was also one of those, like, this could go really well or this could bomb moments. And once I realized I can't predict whether it's going to go well or bomb, and not only, but the more I worry about it, the more it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So my job is to show up. I'm going to show up. And then we're just going to be curious and we're going to listen, and we're not going to worry about what may or may not go wrong, besides going off on a couple of non-turns on the way there and the road. But, the rest is just let it go. Let go of the prediction of how the clients may or may not react. Mm-hmm. I don't know it. And I didn't know it. I was very pleasantly surprised the whole time because of the curiosity piece and the mindfulness. I was like, oh, wow, didn't expect that. This is really cool.
I think that's a really good point. When I say it's exhausting, it is exhausting to start to do that. But you're right. Once you are in the practice, it's becomes so much more exhausting to not be mindful when you realize that you're telling all these extra stories that aren't really there, or fighting battles that haven't even been started, or assuming the client's going to have a reaction that we haven't even started to give them the first piece of information. It's something that you become so much less tiring that it becomes very energizing, because now you get to choose all these things and you have that curiosity, you have that fun. And I think it's a great description of it, that it becomes so much more energy and things you can put into what you want to get out of life.
Yes, indeed. And that energy translates. So that energy is actually felt in the room. It's the energy of openness and psychological safety versus the energy of, oh, you just walked in with the script. This is going to go awesome. Because I can see it in your face. You might as well hand me the script so that I can make sure to say exactly what you're expecting me to say.
Or can I at least know what you think I would be about to say, so we can talk about the cat?
Can we skip to the end? Since this is clearly not going to be an open and curious conversation where you bother to figure out what I'm feeling or listening to what I'm saying.
And there's a good example of when you're feeling mindful or not, and when other people are feeling mindful or not, they probably come out swinging with statements that feel much too broad. Like, you always do this. This never happens this way. Always, like these black and white statements where you're like, well, I'm guessing this is coming from a point of very strong reaction that is not necessarily taking the moment in.
Indeed, yes. Yeah. And those kind of blanket statement about not what happened or the action, but about the person. That's a very non-mindful way to approach this. When, you show up late or you struggle with something once and it becomes this, like, you are incapable of defining this. And I'm like, really? Like 45 years old, 45 years of like, every time I'm incapable of doing that. This is now a personality trait.
Mm-hmm.
This is not, maybe this is confusing. Yeah.
Imagine feel the difference between those two reactions, right? I felt a little frustrated when you didn't have X prepared is a very different statement than you can never get your work done on time. Which one do you think is going to elicit a bit of a more defensive, reactive response?
Well, and that's the harm in not practicing mindfulness and understanding it, and really focusing on making it a way of living, is that the opposite is living in constant threat reaction. So everything is a threat. It's like that saying, like, if you're a hammer, everything is gonna look like a nail, and that's true. If you're never here in the moment, which, if you ask Eckhart Tolle, the moment, the only thing that exists. So where the hell are you? Because the next moment that you're worried about is also going to be the only thing that exists when you get there. But it's, and you're constantly thinking like, oh, they're going to say this, or I need to be worried about that, or I don't have time for this meeting. I need to be sending that email. Whatever it is that's going on, that's not just being here with that conversation, with that person, with that task, whatever it is, that is now a threat response, because now you're constantly fighting against reality, really.
Yeah. And there's so much implied inefficiency in that, right? If you're constantly thinking about like what email you have to write while there's a conversation happening, there's a good chance you either have to stop and go back and be like, sorry, what did you say about that? What was I missed that? Or you never come back to it. Now this is going to have to be revisited somehow later. I mean, what if somebody drops a piece of key information that you didn't happen to be there for, presently, even if you were technically there? What happens then, right? Does this blow up down the road? Is this now a new misunderstanding that gets spun off? And then there's other feelings because it was known by that other person that it was said at some point. I mean, these are the dangers you run into if you're not paying attention more closely. And it's easy to say like, well, what if the person's just like wasting my time? Then you'll have to be mindfully aware of this. I need to wrap this up. Find your way to establish your boundary. Find your way to say, hey, I'm going to have to see myself out of this conversation.
Yes.
Or let's revisit this later, or can you summarize this?
And that's completely, acceptable. It's a lot more acceptable to actually admit what's going on and be honest about it. Talk about integrity. But it's to say like, what, I have this meeting coming up after this, or I have to finish this SOW or contract or statement of work. And it doesn't matter what you're going to say. I'm not going to be focused enough. I'm mentally not prepared to actually be here and listen and help. Mm-hmm. So can we revisit, unless this is a life emergency, can we, find a minute until my mind is actually free? Say that, admit that. We all know our minds are never free.
Mm-hmm. And that's a really good point, because it might feel like you're like showing that person disrespect by saying, I'm not going to listen to you right now, but you're showing them a lot more respect than pretending to listen to them. You're showing the respect of like, look, I value what you're about to say. And I know that I am not going to hear it if you say it right now. I would love to revisit this because I do think that's important. I'd love to come back to this later.
Yeah. If you can't be mindful, then say, I can't be mindful. And I've had to do that with the kids as well, which is not easy, because I would love to be able to always drop what I'm doing to go do whatever they want me to do. And sometimes I can. And I've just told them, like, listen, would love to, and not going to be able to, not right now. So give me an hour, give me 2 hours, give me a day. This is what's happening.
Yes. And otherwise they might spin out a story of like, oh, they don't care about this, they don't do that, unless you can provide those reasons. And this is definitely applies with parenting, also applies with every workplace communication, right? Like if, especially from a leader or a boss coming down and saying like, I don't have the time for this right now, I do want to have this conversation. That's totally different than I don't want to hear this right now. Or I can't talk about that right now. Giving the reasons, giving that we will revisit this. Now the person's not going to go run off to tell stories to themselves and potentially to other coworkers about how they're never listened to, or they'll never get their point across, or we're all going to fail because this was a very important thing to say. Whatever story it is, it's about to spin out of control.
It is, yes. Or my favorite in the top 10 of leadership failures, you should know. Even though they didn't even bother to listen to the question. Is the answer is you should know. So now go and stop bothering me.
I'll go back and sit in my shame puddle now, and we'll all do much better next time.
Exactly. Yes. It's a sad day when you actually have to establish that and say, like, listen, like I realize the should, and if I did know, I wouldn't ask. So can we get past the should know and go back to the question?
The premise of my question was that I do not know. So should really doesn't enter right now.
If I didn't know, would I be asking?
Can you imagine if that was helpful? Like, hey, I just had this question on this. Somebody's like, well, you should know. I'd be like, oh, thank goodness. Okay. Well, then I'm sure I do. I'll go back to my desk now.
Sorry. Yeah. Let me go and switch my brain. I put on the wrong head this morning, and that one didn't know. This one does. Of course, I should know.
Swap my brain out.
You resolved everything. Thank you. I know. Thank you so much for injecting yourself in my head and telling me what is there and what is not.
Okay, great. Well, I'll just keep rummaging around up here then. I'm sure it's in one of these boxes.
I know. Yeah.
You said something a little earlier about being able to consciously choose some things too. And I think that, or noticing more of things. And that's one thing that I think we should also highlight is practices like gratitude journals, or taking moments to write down gratitudes, or things that give you energy or don't give you energy. Those are other types of journaling we've done. I think those are important because you do start to identify the things you're looking for. You think about like, I recently got I say recently, it's been 5 years. There's a pandemic in between then and now, but
there's 2 years of Twilight Zones. There's a portal that sucked the 2 years away in some cases and extended the 2 years to feel like they're 20 in other cases.
That is the time warp that I always kind of hedge my bets and call 5 years. Was it 20? Was it 2? I'd say 5. It's I got a car. It's a Volkswagen, and I've never had a Volkswagen before. And I was certainly on the road, and I was like, oh, there's so many Volkswagens around. It's like saying, like, don't think about a pink elephant. Like, that's what you're going to think about. That's what you're going to see. So doing things like practicing gratitude and doing mindfulness and starting to get curious about what there is to see suddenly it opens you up to the viewpoint that there is more to see, or there's something that if you focus on, you will find more of it because you just weren't looking for it up to that point. You've had a day like where you're super stressed about something, like some timeline is coming up, some deadline or whatever, and you maybe barely squeaking under the wire, and that's something's due at noon or something, and then 12:05 comes around, and you're like, it feels like a brand new day. Like the sun's shining brighter now. Like it's not. It was the same day before, but you were feeling entirely different about it, right? So what's available to you is worth noticing, and mindfulness is a way to get to notice those things.
It's so true. And I am shamefully not journaling as much as I would like to. But I do have a practice. When I started meditating almost 3 years ago, I also started a gratitude practice that now it's become a self-challenge of I'm not going to have an empty day on the dashboard, my leader's board of my own gratitude journal. And so I wake up in the morning, and after I meditate, I actually journal and I write down 3 things I'm grateful for. And I do it every day. It doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to be long. It's just a sentence. I'm grateful for blah, blah, blah. And it's really amazing to have that moment of, again, it's almost like reflection of mindfulness. Because what I usually write down are reflections of the day before or the upcoming day of moments where I want to be fully present or moments where I was fully present.
That brings up a really good point too. Being fully present, in my mind, that's, I think, what people mean a lot when they say things like flow, because that's when I feel like very present. You're just concentrating on literally what's happening. You're in a kind of state of flow, and time starts to feel almost like it doesn't matter because you're there so much, so invested in whatever's happening in the moment. That's what feels like flow to me.
Yes, it definitely does. And since time is a human construct and it doesn't really exist, that's how we can see it stretching and shrinking, is those moments of flow, those moments of fully present become eternal. There's no concept of the clock ticking. You're not present while saying like 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds, 1 minute. No, it's like that. You're not present if you're counting time.
And if you think about that, that happens. People will start to say like, "Oh, the days go slow, but the years go fast." I think that's when you're so worried about the past and the future. You're like, "Oh, all the things that did happen, it should have been different," or the things that I have to be aware of to stop from happening in the future. Then it becomes every day kind of feels long, but not in that flow state, infinite moment kind of long. In the, my God, is it still only 2:30 long?
How is it 9:15?
But then you lose time on the much broader scale. Whereas if you kind of in a state of flow, you're like, wow, I can't believe all these things happened in one day. You look back like that. These 24 hours felt like a much longer 24 hours, and not in like not in a, oh my God, it's still only 3:00 way.
Yes. Yeah. I was just talking about it with my friend Bill, who's going to be on the podcast as a guest. And he was recalling our lunch we had all together recently. And he was saying like, I can't believe it was 90 minutes. It felt like 2. It was such a rich conversation and just a fun time that it just, time didn't exist, and then turn around and it's been 90 minutes.
That's kind of the fun part. You get to like actually experience a full moment and just like have we did share. And that was the first time I'd met Bill in person. And like, we got right into it. And that is a testament to both him being willing to be in the moment and have those kind of conversations and experience it that way. I'm really cool. I hadn't heard him. I hadn't heard that portion. So I'm glad that he felt that way. It was a very fun lunch.
Yes, it was. And it's true. Like, I don't remember ever looking at the clock or having any desire to know how long it was.
Yeah. And that's a really good physical indicator of not being mindful, right? You're looking at your watch. I mean, and it's not to say there aren't appointments we all have to make, of course. And like everything else, this is a practice where you're absolutely not going to be doing this all the time. And you probably shouldn't. There are times where you need to respond to an immediate threat, whatever.
Yes.
Think about deadlines that are coming up because there's something big that will have to happen.
Yeah.
But checking your watch.
Don't stop and smell the roses if the tiger is chasing you. Not the moment.
Hold on for just 1 second there,
Yeah.
buddy.
This
I
is
see
a
the
really
starling
beautiful
teeth,
flower.
but there is a rose right here.
I know. Let me use all 5 senses of on the flower, and then we can continue with the chasing.
I have an image of like accidentally pricking your finger on one of the thorns, and now the blood is into the equation. Now the tiger's after you. I mean, it's just this is not the moment.
Not the moment.
You need to be fully in the moment of where your feet are placing running.
Exactly. Your mindfulness exercise is to let your threat response take over.
I was in a real state of flow, I'll tell you what, as I sprinted 5 miles back to my village.
Well, and actually, ironically enough, we can be in a state of flow. It's not constructive flow. It's destructive flow. When we are responding to a threat, and, tigers and roses aside, let's say we feel defenses, we have been accused or something triggered us, and our threat response of yelling back, becoming defensive, responding to the accusations, whatever it is, if we think about most of those moments, we have lost concept of time. We have lost concept of anything that's around us, except for, I need to defend myself right now because you are threatening my well-being. And so everything that I say and do from this moment on, I have zero control over.
Yeah. And that actually brings up an interesting point that people have talked about with the pandemic. We kind of joked about it earlier, between it being like 2 or 7 or maybe 25 years that happened in the last 3. Is that you do have that non-timeliness in a threat response. There's not really this concept of what's happening, or just what needs to happen. And that there are parts of that reaction activated when we go through things like a pandemic, and we have a lot of stress about going places. There's unknowns, who's got what, who's safe and not, whatever. These are so many unknowns that we are dealing with, but it's on such a prolonged scale that we simultaneously aren't processing time, and yet large amounts of time are happening. And so that's one of the reasons that it's so common to hear people say, yeah, that was 2 years ago. No, that was 4 years ago. Because even though we experienced 2 years, we didn't log it the same way.
Yeah, so true. And so I think that the difference between a mindful moment and a threat response moment is that the mindful moment, we choose to be present. Our mind is completely open to the curiosity and the moment. We do utilize all our senses to take in the moment. We notice the sound, we notice the smells, we notice the joy and content, or the flow of being at peace. Our body is not tense. It's, we're relaxed. And then when we go back and remember, that's like, oh, that was a good moment. The threat response is the opposite. We don't notice anything else except for whatever we need to defend ourselves from.
That's a really good point. Yeah, a really good way to break those up, because the threat response is entirely different and large scale involuntary, whereas mindfulness is exactly the opposite. The point is to be present and choose.
Yes. Yeah. And it's this constant choice of like, I want to keep playing. I want to keep being here. It's like I'm choosing my reactions and my responses, as opposed to just letting whatever took over. Hulk. I call it my Hulk.
Hulk, Gremlins, any voices, is it all great versions of exactly what happens there? It's something that's taking over that you're not really choosing at that point. Like the Hulk. Now you're green and smashing cars.
Yeah, lots of smashing. And it's usually smashing of feelings and smashing of relationships and
everything that we've all done and
connections
later looked back on with a wins.
Yes, everything that's like, oh, okay, let's hope that doesn't, end everything. And sometimes it does. Then you look back and I'm like, well, that smash was the final smash.
Mm-hmm. And another reason why it's important to practice mindfulness and get to those places. And a good example of why it's energizing to be in that space when you get those choices. It becomes the energizing thing.
Yeah, one of the best places to be is when there is a threat coming towards us, and it somehow bounces off our mindful wall, so that we actually just see it. And, it can happen with when once there's practice and there's awareness, it can happen with, anyone just, accusing, asking, whatever button they just pushed. You actually realize, oh, button is about to get pushed, but it's like, but that has nothing to do with me. So I'm just not going to go down that path. And I'm going to switch to curiosity of like, what's going on with the other person? Because whatever is going on, not about me.
I know exactly what you mean. I've had many instances feeling that. And one that comes to mind is actually kind of to do with work. When I approach something that either I feel unfamiliar with or it feels large and ambiguous, I'm not sure how to approach it. Default would be kind of some avoidance, right? Feeling like, okay, well, I'm going to have to figure that one out later. I don't know if I have time to research that right now. And then, it gets more and more down the line. And now you're doing all that research on crunch time, et cetera. It was a common pattern for a while. As I started to realize that, I started to get better at noticing when that feeling was about to start. This threat is about to shut down, starting out something that I know will need some attention. So if I can address that, stop it, be like, yeah, I know this is going to be difficult. I don't really know where to start yet, but I also can recognize that this has happened many times before. There are many times when I don't know what to do yet, and I will go figure that out. Like, I think I'll survive this time. Now I have a chance to get ahead of this instead of doing it all in crunch time under the maximum amount of stress.
Yep. Yeah, that's a very good point. It's for tasks too, not just human relationships.
Mm-hmm. Because our reactions are the same. We have a reaction to the task, we have a reaction to the people. And that's what they say. Mm-hmm. Procrastination is not avoiding a task, it's avoiding the feelings that task is bringing. But when for me, it very much comes along when there's things I'm like, oh man, I don't even know where to start on this. And I'm not even going to go figure out how to start it.
Yeah. Just, waiting for that moment when somebody else does it for me.
Boy, I hope somebody chooses for me. And then they do, and you're like disappointed in the result. You're like, why didn't I choose?
Oh, yes.
Understandable.
Yes. Yeah. We avoid it until somebody else does it. I'm like, that's not what I wanted.
And there you are. You have it. You knew all along somewhere what you wanted.
Yeah. So good conversation on mindfulness and some practical way to practice it, I guess.
And a fun brief one that I want to mention that I just recently read about that I've tried a couple of times, it's kind of nice, is if you find yourself context switching a lot, there's something called interstitial journaling, where you just kind of literally 2 sentences of like, oh, I was just doing this and now I'm going to have to move on to this. So it literally puts you in the mind space of the transition and be like, this is what's coming up next, refocus on the next thing, abandon what, not abandon, but let go of what was there before. So you don't have to be carrying that, that you're making this change. And then you also have kind of a fun record of like, oh, right, I did this thing and that was right before that. And I remember feeling worried at this point and moving to there. But that was just a brief one that I only have just recently started experimenting with, but it's kind of fun to try.
Oh, yeah. I love that one. And it reminds me of something I did as part of this project leadership course program that included some group coaching as well. And the facilitator, the instructor started our sessions. They were weekly or bi-weekly, I can't remember, for an hour or so, but she started and ended every session with having us stop and kind of like be mindful through showing one of those like emotion charts. It looks like a flower and it's got all sorts of emotions written. And so the exercise was to actually look at it and be like, okay, figure out, like in your head, you don't have to say it out loud, but in your head, be mindful and stop and figure out what is it that you're feeling. Which of these feelings are you feeling now? And she always explained it, which was a great practice, as we've just come off of a whole day of work and meetings and cooking dinner and whatever. We're going to go into a whole other list of things that we have to do. However, to be present, we actually have to name our feelings right now so that we can let go of what was happening before, and we can not think about what's about to happen after the session is over.
I like that a lot. And those are some of the things that you get into, like the subconscious practice. I think people think of journaling and they think about doing these kind of things every day. And I think it is helpful to start doing meditation or journaling every day to get the habit. But like you were mentioning, you almost felt ashamed you weren't doing as much journaling now. It's something that will taper off over time, or have moments where it comes back in for a bit and goes back down, because there are more times, sometimes when you need to name many more emotions, sometimes when you need to journal many more things, and other times when it feels less so because you're kind of on top of processing these things.
Yep, definitely.
Well, I hope this helps with just any tips of getting started with mindfulness, and clarifies a little bit about what it is, and the fact that it is not just, in a Venn diagram between that and meditation, they are not the same.
No. They're connected, but not the same.
Please enjoy, go forward, and have a nice mindful day.